Of course, the J.W. McConnell Foundation has been so instrumental in this. So these are the people that we have had a chance to actually think with and extend the work with. So the other thing about Tyze and why all of these partners are interested is that there's a lot of opportunities. This has a lot of opportunity to scale to many other populations. So we're really quite focused, working with older adults, aging well as it's known, and people with disabilities and so on, but these are all potentially other verticals that we could go into at some point in the future. So you just see that from the idea of the growth of an organization and where the potential is. And this is very important. Again, I'm going to emphasize Tyze is a social mission business. In order to actually survive, we need to have investors and we need to have sales. We need to get it out in the world. There's lots of interest in Tyze as well because it meets challenges that our systems are facing. And I think some of these challenges will apply to many of you in some of the work that you're doing. So here are the challenges that Tyze provides a practical solution for. We need effective responses for isolation and loneliness. So from our perspective, isolation underpins our most intractable social issues. Here is a practical tool to address that. Secondly, consumers want a more personalized, self-directed approach to their own care. The technology provides that. There is a need for us to use and find new sources of capital to create new solutions. There's no way for our government systems in particular to continue funding in the way that we have. So Tyze is an example where you just saw from our partners right there, where we have revenue that or income that comes into the organization from philanthropies, from government, from business investors, and from the nonprofit sector as well. So that's a different kind of flow and combination. And lastly, in terms of a cross-system challenge, collaborative approaches to care that address physical and human resources constraints are needed. The UK has a really terrible name for this. They call it co-production. But I'd like to just go underneath that a little bit because what they are talking about is the reality that to provide good health and social care outcomes, our formal systems of care need to work with our informal systems, our friends, family, and neighbors. Don't forget that the friends, family, and neighbor side is already providing 80% of the care. But if you are in any one of those formal systems, and if any of you have had the experience of going in there, you'll know it's almost unrecognized in many, many cases. So the technology of Tyze presents some really interesting opportunities to pass information and resources between these two systems. So we're doing some interesting work related to intranets of organizations, connecting their internal communications with a Tyze network as an example. We're just about to do something really interesting with St. Elizabeth Healthcare here in Ontario. So they're an in-home, well, they're quite a large health organization, but the people we're going to work with are their personal support workers. And they go in-home and provide in-home support to people experiencing health challenges. Those support workers are going to be trained as Tyze connectors. They're going to help a family create a Tyze network. And can you imagine the kinds of postings that they might put on the site? And just imagine yourself, if it's your mother or your sister or your cousin who has one of the, you're a member of their Tyze network, and you open up your email inbox and you get this message that says, oh, saw Mrs. Smith today and she was in really great spirits. So that's just a little piece of reassurance, nice to know. Or you could open up your email inbox and there's a message that says, oh, when I went to see Mrs. Smith today, I noticed that the front porch light is burnt out. Suddenly there's a call to action, something I can do. So this is one of the ways that this is a very distilled, practical example of how these connections can work between the formal and informal. There's many more significant and profound ones really related to health care. Information about health comes from the consumer, and it's very important to be feeding that back into the formal system. Here's a story that illustrates that a little bit. This is Charles, and Charles is in Scotland, and his network was started by his son John in Vancouver, and included his sister in Singapore, one sister in Singapore, one sister in London. Had Charles's osteopath on it, and somebody that they all affectionately referred to as the neighbor lady. And the osteopath was a regular poster to Tyze about what kind of shape that Charles was in. Interestingly, it was the neighbor lady who noticed that Charles was not regularly sort of bringing in his paper and his milk. It would go in, but not the kind of clockwork habit things that people were used to about him. And that was the beginning of a flag that Charles's memory was beginning to go. That resulted in certainly John and his sisters having a conversation, his sister from London popping up there saying, hey, you know, this is a bit serious. John comes over from Vancouver. They get the Scottish National Health Service involved. And in Scotland, in all of the UK, basically, the approach is keep people at home. So that's the real emphasis. And how they do it is through a lot of technology. So they bring in all of those kind of sensors and monitors of how often a door is open or a person gets in and out of bed or if they take their pills. And so that was the response of the system, which is fine because Charles wanted to live alone and stay in his home. But a very interesting thing was revealed in this is that those technological systems needed the information of the informal, the people who know and love Charles, to know how to set them up, to set the patterns up, to understand what his preferences were, and so on. So again, this sort of formal, informal responses, there's a very critical role here for the informal. There's certainly some policy implications in the work, and I believe that Tyze is pushing that edge out there. Privacy. So, for example, back to that home support worker at St. Elizabeth Healthcare, what can she post? Is she allowed to talk about healthcare information? All those kinds of things, the information that family wants. So we're working through some of those things within organizations. Supported decision making. Imagine a network that really acts as representatives of an individual collectively to make good decisions, to support them to make good decisions. Or authentication and validation. Imagine that a network actually has a role in validating that this person is who they are online and monitoring the transactions and all the exchanges between the various formal systems that are supporting the person. And lastly, of course, the most important part for us is policy implications related to belonging and care and contributing to an understanding that we as Canadians are really ready and willing to care, and it just takes an invitation, a simple invitation. Here's some of the current research that we're involved with. We have usability experience research going on. Interesting little side story here that this usability research we're able to do because a company called Vision Critical has adopted us. So how does that happen in this mean, nasty business world and all those kinds of things that are out there about this company? And this company is an aggressive world leader in online market research. They took a real interest in what we were trying to do. We're a little bit different. We share some similarities to how they work. And this company has literally, not only have they given us this world-class panel to be using with our users to get their experience, they've given us access to their personnel director who's helped us with hiring. They've given us access to their salespeople to look at what a sales model is, all of these kinds of things. And I think that's a whole other story to be told about how business can help in a really practical way. We have research as well, as I mentioned already, we have a peer-reviewed piece of research with that work at St. Elizabeth Healthcare going on in terms of the caregiver outcomes and also the personal support worker outcomes. What is it like for them in working with networks? We've got research going on the impact on formal and informal systems of care with the Center for Technology and Aging. This is a US-based resource, a phenomenal facility. They do a lot of research and a lot of policy work. So they're going to evaluate what is happening for the organizations in California that are using Tyze. how does it work for them? What are the implications for their staff? What are the implications for their policy?